My daughter-in-law called me the family's embarrassment. Little did she know my simple idea would land me on the cover of Forbes and make me $32 million. Today, I can still feel how those words pierced my soul like shattered glass. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would. And if, for a second, you feel like this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me to keep unburdening myself. My name is Helen Miller. I'm 64 years old, and I live in a small second-floor apartment in Logan Square, Chicago. My hands are marked by 60 years of work, cleaning other people's houses, washing laundry until my knuckles cracked, sewing buttons under the dim light of a lamp I still own. My son, Thomas, is my only treasure since I was widowed 15 years ago, when Robert died in that cursed factory that never complied with safety regulations. That Tuesday in October, while I was making iced tea in my small kitchen, the one where the tile is chipped but where every corner holds the scent of cinnamon and vanilla I learned from my mother, I received a call that would change me forever. It was Jessica, my daughter-in-law, with that sweet voice she used when she needed something. "Helen, can you come over this afternoon? The kids want to see you, and besides, I need you to help me with a few things around the house." My heart swelled with that foolish joy only grandmothers understand, the kind that waits for any excuse to hug their grandchildren. I put on my navy blue dress, the same one I've worn for special occasions for the last 5 years, and took the CTA bus to Lincoln Park, where they live in that 3-story house Thomas bought with his salary as a sales manager. I arrived 15 minutes early. The housekeeper let me in and told me Mrs. Jessica was in the garden, on the phone. I sat in the living room, admiring the beige leather furniture that cost more than everything in my apartment, when I heard her voice filter through the half-open window. "I swear to God, Brenda, if that old woman opens her mouth at the PTA meeting again, I'll die of embarrassment. Did you see what she was wearing last time? She looked like she just came from a flea market. All disheveled, with those old shoes and that plastic bag full of cheap candy for the kids." My blood ran cold. That old woman was me. And you can't imagine how she smells, Brenda. Of garlic, of cheap food, of poverty. When she comes into the house, I have to open all the windows. Thomas pretends not to notice, but I know he's ashamed too. His mother is a total embarrassment to this family. The words stabbed me like hot knives. My hand trembled as I held the glass of water the housekeeper had offered me. I felt my cheeks burn, my stomach clench as if someone had punched me with all their might. And you know what the worst part is? She cooks with those stale recipes from her little town. Everything tastes like it's from a past century. The kids don't even want to eat when she makes something. We should tell her not to come so often, or at least to dress better. I can't keep introducing her as my mother-in-law when my friends from the club are over. I stood up slowly, my legs like jelly, and walked to the first-floor bathroom. I locked the door and threw up everything I'd had for breakfast. Tears burned my eyes. But it wasn't sadness I felt. It was something much deeper. The humiliation of discovering that the person for whom you had sacrificed your dignity for years saw you as a burden. When I came out of the bathroom, Jessica had finished her call and greeted me with that fake smile I now recognized perfectly. "Helen, so glad you made it. The kids are at school, but they'll be back in an hour. In the meantime, could you help me clean the second-floor windows? The help can't quite reach them." The help. That's what she called me when she needed something. As if I were part of the service staff. As if washing windows was the only thing a 64-year-old woman was good for. A woman who had raised a son alone, who had worked since she was 14, who had built a home with her own 2 hands. "Of course, Jessica," I replied, but my voice sounded different, smaller, more broken. While I cleaned those windows, looking out at the garden where they had eaten breakfast as a family without inviting me, because they never invited me on weekends, I remembered all the times I had washed their children's clothes, ironed Thomas's shirts for his important meetings, prepared my special pot roast for their birthdays, spending my meager pension to buy the best cuts of meat. I remembered the nights I stayed up watching my grandson Paul when he had the chicken pox, while they went to Lake Geneva to distress. I remembered entire afternoons playing with Emma, my granddaughter, at the neighborhood park, while Jessica got her nails done at the salon. Every memory now had a bitter taste. They weren't acts of reciprocated love. They were the free services of an employee who worked for crumbs of affection from her own family. When I finished cleaning, the children arrived from school. Paul, 8, hugged me with that beautiful spontaneity of children. But Emma, 11, barely greeted me. She was already learning from her mother. "Grandma, why do you always smell like food?" Emma asked me with that innocent cruelty that only children who repeat what they hear at home possess. It took my breath away. Jessica gave a nervous laugh and said, "Emma, don't be rude to Grandma." But her tone held no real reproach. It was as if she were doing me a favor by pretending to defend me. That night, in my apartment, I sat in my usual chair, the wooden one I brought from the house where I lived with Robert, and cried like I hadn't cried since his funeral. But this wasn't the clean cry of grief. It was the ugly cry of humiliation, of emotional abandonment, of discovering that I had been begging for love in my own family. I got up slowly, walked to my old dresser, and looked at myself in the mirror. I saw a 64-year-old woman with a bad gray haircut, deep wrinkles around her eyes, rough hands, and clothes that did, in fact, look like they were from another century. I saw the family's embarrassment. I saw what they saw, but something inside me, something that had been dormant for years, began to awaken. A small, clear voice whispered to me, "Helen, you are worth more than this." That night, for the first time in years, I didn't call Thomas to ask how his day had been. The following days passed like a slow-motion movie where I was just an extra in my own life. I couldn't stop thinking about those words, family's embarrassment. They replayed in my head like a cursed song, especially when I made breakfast in my tiny kitchen, when I swept my apartment floor, when I watched the soap operas that used to distract me and now seemed like cruel jokes about perfect families who truly loved each other. Thomas called on Friday, as he always did, but this time his voice sounded different, more distant, as if he were fulfilling an obligation. "Mom, how are you? Jessica said you seemed a little off on Tuesday. Is everything okay?" Off. Of course I was off after discovering my own daughter-in-law considered me a social leper. But how do you explain to your son that his wife despises you without sounding like a bitter mother-in-law who invents problems? "Everything's fine, honey. Just a little tired." "Oh, okay. Hey, I need to ask you a favor. Can you lend us $500? Things got a little tight this month with the kids' tuition and the car insurance payment. We'll pay you back next month, as always." As always. Those two words hit me because it was true. For the last 5 years, I had been lending them money that was never returned. Money from my miserable $9.50 a month Social Security check. Money I stretched to pay my rent, my blood pressure medication, my food. I remembered when Thomas got married 7 years ago and asked for help with the down payment on the house. "It's only $10,000, Mom. It's an investment in your grandchildren's future." I sold the jewelry Robert had given me during our marriage. My gold earrings, my chain with the gold cross, my engagement ring that I had treasured after his death. Exactly $10,000. They never paid me back. I remembered when Emma turned 5 and they wanted to have a party for her at the club's ballroom. "Mom, can you help us with the decorations and the cake? It's only $800, but we want Emma to have the birthday she deserves." I spent almost my entire month's check on balloons, tablecloths, flowers, and a 3-tiered cake I ordered from the most expensive bakery in the neighborhood. At the party, they introduced me as the grandma who helped with the details, as if I were part of the hired staff. I remembered the Christmases where I arrived with gifts for everyone, toys for the kids, perfume for Jessica, shirts for Thomas, and they would give me a generic card that said, "For Grandma with love," without a personal signature, as if they had bought it 5 minutes before I arrived. I remembered the sleepless nights I spent when Paul was hospitalized with pneumonia 2 years ago. I stayed at the hospital while they took turns going to work so they wouldn't lose a day's pay. I slept in an uncomfortable chair, ate saltine crackers and vending machine coffee, sang him lullabies so he wouldn't be scared. When he recovered, Thomas told me, "Thanks for taking care of him, Mom. We knew we could count on you. Count on me." Like you count on a service that's available 24 hours a day, at no cost, with no complaints, with no right to be tired. "Mom, are you there? Can you do the 500 or not?" His impatience snapped me out of my tunnel of memories. The saddest part was he didn't even bother to invent creative excuses. He just assumed I would say yes, as always. Let me see what I can do, Thomas. Perfect. Jessica will stop by for the money tomorrow. Oh, and by the way, Sunday is Jessica's dad's birthday. We're celebrating at his house in Lake Geneva. Better if you don't come, Mom. It's just going to be a small family thing, you know. And Grandpa Charles is very traditional. We don't want to make him uncomfortable. We don't want to make him uncomfortable. Meaning, they didn't want me to make him uncomfortable with my presence, with my cheap clothes, with my smell of garlic and poverty, as Jessica had said. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my bills spread out like tarot cards predicting misfortune. My Social Security, $950. My rent, $500. Utilities, $150. Medicine, $100. Food, $200 if I was very careful. I had nothing left for emergencies, clothes, or any other curveball life wanted to throw at me. The $500 Thomas was asking for represented more than half of my basic monthly expenses. I would have to borrow from Mrs. Davis in apartment 4B, the woman who cleans offices in the early morning, and who always greets me with genuine warmth when we meet in the hallway. I would have to humiliate myself by asking for money from a woman who earned less than me, to give it to my son who drives a car that costs more than everything I've earned in my life. But the most painful thing was remembering how things had changed after Jessica came into our lives. Before, Thomas used to visit me on Sundays. We'd have breakfast together in my little kitchen. He'd tell me about his work, ask about my friends from the market, about the woman who sells vegetables and knows all the neighborhood gossip. We'd watch cartoons on TV while I ironed his shirts, and he'd help me fix something broken in the apartment. After he got married, the visits became sporadic. Then, just phone calls. Then, only when he needed something. And now, he didn't even pretend to care how I was. He only called when he needed money, or when he needed me to watch the kids, or when Jessica had some chore she preferred to delegate to the mother-in-law who has nothing better to do. On Saturday, Jessica came for the money. I'd had to borrow it from Mrs. Davis, making up a story about a new medicine the doctor had prescribed. It hurt to lie to that good woman who offered me the $500 without asking questions, with the trust of someone who knows what it means to need help. Jessica arrived dressed like a magazine model. Designer white pants, a silk blouse, shoes that cost more than my monthly rent. She didn't even sit down. She stood in the doorway, as if my apartment were contagious. Thanks for the loan, Helen. You know how things are. Everything is getting so expensive. Everything is getting so expensive, she said, while wearing a gold bracelet on her wrist that I hadn't seen before, while smelling of French perfume, while her perfect nails held out a hand, expecting me to place the bills in her palm, like a handout in reverse. Jessica, when do you think you'll be able to pay me back? For the first time, she looked me directly in the eye, and in that look, I saw something that chilled me to the bone. Pure contempt. Oh, Helen, don't be so cheap. After all, this money is for your grandchildren, for their education, for their future. Isn't that what matters most to you? Cheap. She had called me cheap for asking when they would pay back money I had to borrow. Money I needed to buy my medicine, to pay for my food, to survive with dignity in the last years of my life. I gave her the $500 and closed the door slowly, as if it were the end of something very important. That night, for the first time in my adult life, I wondered if I had been a bad mother, if maybe I deserved the treatment I was receiving, if it was true that I was a bother, a burden, that I was, in fact, an embarrassment. I went to bed with that doubt stuck in my chest like an infected thorn. But before I fell asleep, something strange happened. I found an old photograph of Robert and me on our first anniversary in my nightstand drawer. We were at the Botanic Garden, on a bench surrounded by flowers. I was 28, he was 30. We were smiling with that genuine happiness of two people who truly love each other and don't need to pretend for anyone. The woman in that photograph had dignity. She had self-respect. She had a right to be happy. At what point had I lost all that? The weeks that followed were like walking through quicksand. Each day I sank a little deeper into the feeling of being invisible, of not mattering, of existing only when they needed something from me. My 65th birthday arrived on a Thursday in November. I woke up early, as always, made my coffee on the stove, and sat by the window, waiting for a call, a text, any sign that someone remembered that on this day, 65 years ago, I had come into the world. The phone didn't ring all morning. I checked my old cell phone every 5 minutes, thinking maybe it was broken, maybe I hadn't heard the ringer. At 2 in the afternoon, I called Thomas. Hello? Honey, it's me. Oh, hey, Mom. Is everything okay? I'm in a meeting. I just wanted to say hi. Today is, well, you know what day it is today. A long silence. So long I thought the call had dropped. Oh, right. Your birthday. Sorry, Mom. It totally slipped my mind. We have a really important project at the office. But happy birthday, huh? We'll call you later to celebrate. Later. Always later. I hung up the phone and sat there, watching the hours pass as slowly as cold honey. At 8 o'clock, Mrs. Davis knocked on my door. She was holding a piece of 3-layer cake with a candle in it. Happy birthday, Helen. May God grant you many more years of health. She was the only person who remembered. A woman I had only known for 2 years, who worked cleaning offices to survive, had remembered my birthday when my own family had forgotten. That night, I cried until I ran out of tears. It wasn't just the forgotten birthday. It was the accumulation of 100 small cruelties that had been killing me from the inside without me realizing it. Like when I'd arrive at their house and Emma, my granddaughter, would say, "Grandma, why do you always wear the same clothes?" And Jessica would laugh as if it were funny, as if poverty were a joke everyone could enjoy except me. Like when Paul was at the dinner table talking about his day at school, and I would try to join the conversation, and Jessica would cut me off. "Helen, why don't you go to the kitchen and see if the food is ready?" As if my words had no value. As if my presence was only tolerable when I was serving. Like when Thomas talked about his professional achievements and I, filled with pride, would try to tell a guest how I had raised this successful man all by myself, and he would cut me off with an uncomfortable smile. "Mom, let's talk about something else." As if my sacrifice were something shameful that shouldn't be discussed in public. The last straw came on a Sunday in December. It was the Christmas festival at Emma's school, and they invited me because they needed someone to watch the parents' coats while they watched the show. It wasn't so I could watch my granddaughter sing carols. It was so I could work for free as a coat check attendant. For 2 hours, I stood in a damp little room, hanging expensive suits, designer coats, handbags that cost more than my expenses for 3 months. The parents handed me their things without even looking me in the face, as if I were part of the furniture. Some didn't even say thank you. When the festival was over, Emma came running up, excited. "Grandma, did you see my song? Did you like my dress?" "I couldn't see you, sweetie. I was watching the coats." The look of disappointment on that 11-year-old's face is etched in my memory forever. It wasn't her fault. It was her parents' fault, for turning me into family servitude instead of treating me like the grandmother who deserved to be in the front row, applauding her granddaughter. That night, I couldn't take it anymore. I got to my apartment, and something inside me broke for good. It wasn't a scream, it wasn't a tantrum. It was something much deeper. A silent collapse, like when the most important string on a guitar snaps and the entire instrument loses its ability to make music. I sat in my old armchair, the same one where Robert and I used to watch the 9 o'clock soaps, and for the first time in my adult life, I allowed myself to think the unthinkable. What if I just stopped existing for them? How long would it take them to notice if I stopped answering the phone? How long would it take for them to ask about me if I didn't show up when they needed me to babysit, lend money, clean windows, or act as a coat check at social events? The answer terrified me because I knew it with certainty. They would only look for me when they needed something. I got up like a sleepwalker and walked to my dresser. I opened the drawer where I kept the few pieces of jewelry I had left. A pair of fake pearl earrings I'd bought at a flea market, a silver-plated chain that was turning green, a watch Robert gave me on our 10th anniversary that no longer worked but that I kept for sentimental reasons. Underneath the jewelry, I found something I had completely forgotten, a small notebook where, years ago, Robert and I had written down our dreams. Silly dreams, beautiful dreams, traveling to Florida to see the ocean, opening a small diner where I would cook my recipes and he would serve the customers, having a little house with a garden where we could plant our own vegetables. Robert died before we could fulfill any of those dreams. And I had spent the last 15 years living for the dreams of others. For Thomas to get an education, for him to have a nice house, for his children to have everything we couldn't give him. But when was the last time I had a dream of my own? When was the last time I had done something because it made me happy, not because someone else needed it? When was the last time I had felt that my life had value in itself, not just for what I could give to others? I closed the notebook slowly and hugged it to my chest. For the first time in years, instead of thinking about what I had to do for others, I asked myself, what do I want to do for myself? The question scared me because I didn't know the answer. I had spent so much time being a mother, a wife, a grandmother, a free employee to my own family, that I had completely lost track of who Helen was when she wasn't serving someone else. I couldn't sleep that night. I got up and went to the kitchen. Without thinking too much, I took out flour, eggs, butter. I started making anise cookies, the ones my mother had taught me when I was 10 years old. The recipe was in my blood, but I hadn't made them in years because Jessica always said they smelled too strong and that the kids preferred store-bought cookies. As I kneaded the dough, something strange happened. My hands remembered movements I thought I had forgotten. The aroma of anise filled my small kitchen, and for the first time in months, I smiled. Not a forced smile to please someone. A genuine smile, just for me. When the cookies were ready, I sat down to eat one with my coffee. It tasted exactly as I remembered, like childhood, like quiet Sundays, like love made into food. It tasted like dignity. At that moment, without knowing it, I was taking the first step toward something that would change my life forever. I took my old phone and wrote something I had never done before. I posted in the building's Facebook group. Good evening, neighbors. This is Helen from 2B. I just made some homemade anise cookies from a family recipe. If anyone would like to try some, I have extra. No charge, just for sharing. I sent the message and turned off my phone. I didn't expect a response. I just wanted to do something different, something that made me feel like I existed on my own merits, not for my usefulness to others. That night, I slept better than I had in years, not knowing that I had planted the seed of my silent revolution. I woke up on Friday to a soft knock on my door. It was 8 in the morning, and I was still in my pajamas, my hair a mess, and my eyes puffy from crying the night before. When I opened it, I found Mrs. Davis, Mr. Gable from the first floor, and a young woman I didn't recognize. "Good morning, Helen," said Mrs. Davis with a huge smile. "We came for the cookies you offered last night. Oh, it smells so wonderful from the hallway." I had completely forgotten my Facebook post. I invited them in and put on a pot of coffee. The young woman turned out to be Sophie, Mr. Gable's granddaughter, a culinary student who was visiting him and had seen my post. "Mrs. Miller, these cookies are incredible," Sophie said after trying one. "The anise has a special touch, different from anything I've ever tasted. Is it a family recipe?" "Yes, from my mother. May she rest in peace. She used to make them to sell at the town fairs." "She sold them? And you never thought of doing the same?" The question took me by surprise. I had never thought about selling food. I had always cooked for my family, for events where they needed my help, but it had never occurred to me that someone might pay for my recipes. "No, dear. I only know home cooking, nothing special." Sophie exchanged a look with her grandfather and Mrs. Davis. "Ma'am, can I be very honest? I study at Kendall College of Culinary Arts, and I've tried food from expensive restaurants, from famous chefs. These cookies have something you can't teach in any school. They have soul." That afternoon, Sophie came back with her phone and convinced me to let her take pictures of the cookies. She also asked me to tell her the story of the recipe while she recorded a short video. "My mother, Hope, used to make them for the town festivals in our small town in Wisconsin, where I was born," I said to the camera, feeling ridiculous, but also strangely excited. "She said the secret was to toast the anise until it released its natural oil, and to add a pinch of coarse salt to enhance the sweetness. And you make them the same way?" "The same, but I added my own touch, a drop of vanilla extract that I buy from a specialty shop. My Robert used to say they reminded him of the Sundays of his childhood. Unbeknownst to me, Sophie uploaded the video to her Instagram that same night. She had 5,000 followers, all young people interested in gastronomy and traditional recipes. The next day, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Mrs. Miller? My name is Carmen Delgado. I saw your video of the anise cookies. Do you sell them? My mother was from a similar area and made ones just like them, but she passed away without teaching me the recipe. Sell them? No, I'll pay whatever you ask. My mother's memorial is tomorrow, and I wanted to bring something special to the cemetery. That call changed something inside me. Someone wanted to pay for something I knew how to do. Someone valued my hands, my knowledge, my time. I sold her 24 cookies for $20. It was the first time in my life I had earned money with my own skills, not as a housekeeper or babysitter, but by creating something that had value in itself. When Thomas called on Sunday to ask me to watch the kids because they had decided to go to a resort for the weekend at the last minute, for the first time in years, I said no. What do you mean you can't, Mom? It's only for 2 days. I can't because I have to work. Work? What work? I'm selling homemade cookies. I have orders to fill. The silence on the other end of the line was so long I thought he had hung up. Selling cookies? Mom, please. Since when do you sell food? The condescending tone in his voice hurt me, but it also infuriated me. Why was it impossible for him to imagine that his mother could have a valuable skill? Since I realized I know how to make things that people want to buy. But Mom, that's not serious. It's just a hobby. The kids need you. Thomas, find a babysitter. I have commitments. I hung up, trembling. It was the first time I had said no to my son about something important. I felt guilty, rebellious, and proud all at the same time. That same afternoon, Jessica showed up at my apartment unannounced. She stormed in like a hurricane, with that indignant look she got when things didn't go her way. Can you tell me what's wrong with you, Helen? Thomas tells me you can't watch the kids because you're selling food. Seriously? At your age, you're going to start working as a cook. I don't work as a cook. I sell homemade products that I make myself. It's the same thing. Look, we already found a sitter for this time. But I need you to understand one thing. You are the grandmother. Your job is to be available for your grandchildren when they need you, not to be inventing ridiculous businesses that will take time away from what's truly important. Her words hit me like slaps. My job was to be available, as if my only value was being a free resource for when they needed me. Jessica, my grandchildren are very important to me, but I also have a right to do things that make me happy. Happy? Oh, Helen, please. Happiness at your age comes from watching your grandchildren grow up, from knowing you were a good mother and a good grandmother, not from selling cookies on the street like, she didn't finish the sentence, but I knew what she was going to say, like a homeless person, like someone with no class, like an embarrassment to the family, like a woman who can support herself. I finished. Jessica stared at me with a mix of surprise and indignation. It was the first time I had talked back to her, that I hadn't lowered my head and accepted her scolding like a disobedient child. Look, Helen, I don't think you're understanding me. This family has a reputation to uphold. Thomas has a position at his company. The children go to the Latin school. We can't have you going around selling food like someone who needs to work. I am someone who needs to work. My Social Security is $950 a month. You ask me for money you never pay back. If selling cookies helps me live better, I'm going to keep doing it. But what will the parents at the school say if they find out that Emma and Paul's grandmother sells food? What will people at Thomas's office say? For the first time, I saw her real fear. She wasn't worried about my well-being or my happiness. She was worried about her social image. She was terrified that her poor mother-in-law, who she had previously kept hidden like a shameful family secret, would now be visible, selling products on the street. They'll say that Emma and Paul's grandmother knows how to make delicious cookies and is a hardworking woman. Helen, please, don't be naive. People are going to think that Thomas doesn't support you, that we're a family of deadbeats who needs the grandmother to work to survive. And there was the whole truth. The contempt for my poverty wasn't just about my appearance or my smell of garlic. It was because my financial situation made them look bad. I was the living reminder that Thomas came from humble beginnings, that his success hadn't been enough to erase his modest origins. "Jessica, my financial situation is real whether I work or not. The difference is that now I have a dignified way to improve it. This has to stop, Helen. I'm not going to let you ruin this family's reputation over some old woman's whim." The word whim minimized what for me was a revelation: that I had valuable skills, that I could be independent, that I deserved respect. "It's not your decision, Jessica." "Excuse me?" I said. "It's not your decision what I do with my life." She stood in my living room, her mouth open, as if she couldn't believe I had spoken to her with such firmness. In 7 years of marriage to my son, I had never opposed anything she said, never questioned her orders disguised as suggestions. "You'll see, Helen. You'll see what happens when you start putting your ridiculous inventions before your family. Don't come crying to us later when you realize no one wants you." She left, slamming the door so hard it shook the walls of my apartment. I stood there, my legs trembling but with something new growing in my chest. The feeling that I had defended something important, not just my right to sell cookies, but my right to exist as a person with my own worth. That night, while I was baking a new batch for the next day's orders, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Mrs. Miller, this is Patricia Hernandez from the Taste of the City program on WB's radio. We saw your video of the anise cookies, and we'd love to invite you to talk about traditional recipes on our show this Wednesday. Would you be interested?" The radio. They wanted me to talk on the radio about my recipes. Me? But I'm not a chef or anything special. "That's exactly why, ma'am. We're looking for authentic people who preserve American culinary traditions. Your story is exactly what our listeners want to hear." When I hung up, I sat in my armchair and for the first time in years, I imagined a different future. A future where Helen Miller wasn't just Thomas's mom, or Emma and Paul's grandma, or the mother-in-law who helps with the chores. A future where she was simply Helen, a woman of her own worth. The radio show changed everything. Patricia Hernandez turned out to be a warm woman in her 50s, who welcomed me at the WBEZ offices as if I were a celebrity. She offered me coffee in a porcelain mug, not a disposable cup, and asked me to tell my story with the patience of someone who genuinely wanted to listen. "Mrs. Miller, tell us how you learned these recipes." "Well, Patricia, my mother learned them from my grandmother, who was a cook on a large farm in Wisconsin before the Great Depression. She said the farm owners had taught her techniques that she mixed with the flavors of her own upbringing." "And you've been making them your whole life?" "My whole life, yes, but only for my family. I never thought anyone else would want to try them, let alone pay for them." When the half-hour interview was over, the station's phone lines were ringing off the hook. People asking for my information, asking where they could get the cookies, sharing their own memories of grandmothers who cooked with the same love. 2 days later, I had over 30 orders. I had to ask Mrs. Davis for help buying ingredients because my small kitchen couldn't handle the volume. We bought sacks of flour, pounds of butter, the highest quality whole anise from a gourmet market. "Helen, this isn't a hobby anymore," Mrs. Davis said as we counted the money from the sales. "In 1 week, you've earned more than your Social Security check for 2 months. She was right. I had made almost $2,000 in 5 days. It was real money, earned with my own hands, with my knowledge, with my work. For the first time in years, I went to the bank not to withdraw the last few dollars from my account, but to deposit money. The teller, who knew me from my always nervous visits to get cash, looked at me with curiosity when she saw the stack of bills. "Everything all right, Mrs. Miller?" "Everything is perfect, dear. I'm here to make a deposit." "A deposit?" The surprise in her voice made me laugh. Of course it seemed strange to her. I had always been the old woman who came in anxiously to take out her last few dollars, who checked her balance with a worried face, who sighed when she saw how little was left. "Yes, a deposit. I'm starting a small business." I walked out of the bank differently, with my back straighter, my head held high, with a new feeling in my chest that I later realized was pride. Pride in myself. That afternoon, Thomas showed up at my apartment unannounced. I saw him from the window, climbing the stairs with that serious face he put on when he came to talk to me about something important. But this time, I didn't feel the usual anxiety. I didn't wonder what I had done wrong or what he would need from me. "Hi, honey. Here for some cookies? I've got a fresh batch ready." "Mom, we need to talk." He sat in my armchair as if he owned the place, with that authoritarian posture he had inherited from his father, but without the gentleness Robert had to soften his firmness. "Jessica told me what happened the other day. This is getting out of hand, Mom." "What's getting out of hand?" "This business of yours. Half the neighborhood is talking about my mother selling food. Last week, the HR director at my company asked if it was true my mom was on the radio talking about recipes. And what did you tell him?" "I told him you were going through a late-life crisis and that you'd get over it." His words hurt more than I expected. A late-life crisis. As if my need to feel useful and valued was a temporary mental illness. "Thomas, I'm not in crisis. I'm working." "Mom, please, you don't need to work. We help you when you need something." "You help me? When have you ever helped me?" "Always, Mom. We give you money when you need it. I give you money when you need it. Money I have to borrow because my Social Security isn't enough. But that's our family arrangement. You support us when we need it. We support you when we need it." Family arrangement. As if it were normal for a 65-year-old pensioner to lend money to a sales manager who earned 10 times more than she did. "Thomas, when was the last time you supported me with money?" He was quiet for a long moment. We both knew the answer. Never. In 7 years of marriage to Jessica, they hadn't paid for a single one of my prescriptions. Not $1 of my rent. Not even a bag of groceries when my money ran out. That's not the point, Mom. The point is that this obsession with selling food is changing you. You're not the same. You're right, I'm not the same. And you don't have time for the grandkids either. Emma asked me yesterday why you don't pick her up from school anymore. Emotional manipulation, the most effective weapon they had used against me for years. Using my grandchildren as a shield for their demands. Emma can ask me directly if she wants to see me. She's 11 years old, she knows how to use a phone. See? This is exactly what I'm talking about. Before you would have run to find Emma to explain, to make sure she didn't feel abandoned. Now it seems like you don't care. I care very much. The difference is that now I understand that loving them doesn't mean I have to disappear as a person. Mom, please. This has to stop. It's affecting the whole family. How is it affecting you? We're ashamed, Mom. We're ashamed that people will think we can't support our own mother, that she has to sell food on the street. There it was again. The truth, shame, embarrassment. Their concern wasn't for my well-being, but for how they looked to others. Thomas, I don't sell food on the street. I have a home-based business that is growing. I have clients who value my work. I have my own income that gives me dignity. Dignity? Mom, your dignity comes from being my mother, from being the grandmother of my children. You don't need to look for it elsewhere. For the first time in my life, I saw my son with a clarity that frightened me. He wasn't evil, but he was profoundly selfish. To him, my value was completely defined by my usefulness to him and his family. The idea that I could have my own identity, my own aspirations, my own successes, made him uncomfortable because it meant he could no longer completely control my time and energy. Honey, I will always love you just the same. I will always be your mother and the grandmother of your children, but I will also continue to be Helen. What does that mean? It means I have a right to my own life. He stood up from the armchair with a sigh of exasperation, as if he were dealing with a rebellious teenager instead of his 65-year-old mother. Fine, Mom. Continue with your project if it makes you happy. But when you realize you're losing what's truly important by chasing fantasies, don't come crying to us. After he left, I sat in my living room feeling conflicted. Part of me wanted to run after him, to apologize, to promise I would drop everything and go back to being the 24/7 available mother and grandmother I had always been. But another part, a new and growing part, knew that I had crossed a line from which I could not return. I could no longer pretend that my happiness didn't matter. I could no longer pretend that existing only for others was enough. That night, I baked until 2 in the morning. Anise cookies, lemon shortbread, coconut macaroons I remembered from the fairs of my hometown. Every batch I took out of the oven was a declaration of independence. Sophie showed up the next day with exciting news. Mrs. Miller, a very famous food blogger, shared your story on Instagram. He has 200,000 followers. I already have 50 messages from people asking for information about your products. 50 more orders. My small kitchen was no longer going to be enough. I needed to think bigger, to plan, to organize. For the first time in my life, I had a wonderful problem. More demand than I could meet. Sophie, do you think this could grow even more? Ma'am, this could be huge, but you need professional help. A brand registration, a website, maybe even a small storefront. A storefront, a website, a brand. Concepts that seemed like they were from another world, but that Sophie mentioned as real possibilities for me. That night, for the first time in 15 years, I didn't call Thomas to ask how his day had been. Instead, I sat down with a notebook and started writing ideas, running numbers, planning a future that, for the first time in my adult life, was completely my own. Through the window, I could see the city lights, thousands of people living their own lives, chasing their own dreams. I no longer felt invisible among them. Now I was one of them, a woman with her own plans. 3 weeks later, as I was packing my 120th order of the month, the phone rang with a call I didn't expect. It was Emma, my granddaughter, and her voice sounded strange, as if she had been crying. "Grandma, can I talk to you?" "Of course, sweetie. What's wrong?" "It's just, Mom and Dad are saying mean things about you. They say you don't love us anymore because you'd rather make cookies. Is that true, Grandma?" My heart shattered into a million pieces. They had involved the children in their war against my independence. They had used an 11-year-old girl as a messenger for their emotional manipulation. "Emma, my love, what do you think? Do you think I could ever stop loving you?" "I don't know, Grandma. You used to pick me up from school and now you don't. You used to take me to the park on Saturdays and now you say you have work. Mom says the cookies are more important than us." I sat in my old armchair, feeling the weight of a decision I knew would change everything. I could give up right then, promise to quit the business, go back to being the available grandmother they wanted, or I could explain the truth to my granddaughter, at the risk of her mother forbidding me from seeing her ever again. "Emma, come over tomorrow after school. I'll make your favorite cookies and we'll talk. Just you and me with no one else around." I couldn't sleep that night. I knew that what I told Emma would determine not only our relationship, but the future of the entire family. The next day, Emma arrived at my apartment with that serious face kids get when they feel adults are lying to them about something important. I sat her at my kitchen table, poured her a glass of milk, and placed a plate of freshly baked chocolate chip cookies in front of her. "Emma, sweetie, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I love you exactly the same as I always have. Nothing I do in my life will ever change that. Do you understand? Then why don't you pick me up from school anymore?" "Because they don't ask me to anymore, sweetie. And when I tell them I want to see you, they say you're busy with homework or activities." Emma frowned, as if she were remembering conversations she had only half heard. "But Mom says you don't have time for us anymore." "Emma, do you know how much money your grandma used to make before she started making cookies?" "No. $950 a month. Do you know how much I pay in rent?" "No. $500. Do you know what that means?" Emma shook her head, but her intelligent eyes told me she was starting to understand. "It means your grandma had to choose between buying medicine or buying food. It means that when you guys asked me for money for your tuition or your parties, I had to borrow it from the neighbor because I didn't have it." "Really?" "Really. And now, by making cookies, I earn more in a week than I used to in a month. That means I can buy my medicine, pay for my house, and even save a little." Emma chewed a cookie slowly, processing information that obviously no one had given her before. "And that's why you're happier?" The question caught me off guard. Was I happier? Yes, I definitely was. "Yes, my love. I'm happier because I feel useful, because I know I can take care of myself, because people value me for something I know how to do very well." "What about us?" "You are still the most important thing in my life, but I'm not just your grandma anymore. I'm also Helen, the lady who makes the best cookies in the neighborhood." Emma smiled for the first time since she'd arrived. "You do make the best cookies? The ones at school taste bad compared to yours?" We spent the afternoon baking together. I taught her how to measure the flour, how to beat the eggs until they were frothy, how to shape the cookies with her hands. Emma had a natural talent, the same skilled hands I had inherited from my mother. Grandma, can I come help you more often? Any day you want, my love. But it has to be our secret, okay? Because I don't think your parents would like you learning to cook here. When Jessica came to pick up Emma 2 hours later, she found her daughter covered in flour, her cheeks flushed with laughter, packing cookies into cellophane bags. What is this? Mom, look, I learned to make oatmeal cookies, and Grandma is going to teach me how to make lemon meringue pie next week. Jessica's face transformed into a mask of fury that she didn't bother to hide in front of Emma. Emma, go to the car. Your grandmother and I need to talk. When the girl had left, Jessica approached me with an aggressiveness she had never shown so openly. What did you put in my daughter's head? I taught her how to make cookies. You brainwashed her against us. Emma came home yesterday saying she understood why you needed to work, that it was normal for grandmothers to have their own money. And is that wrong? It's wrong when it destroys the parents' authority. It's wrong when an 11-year-old girl thinks she knows more than the adults about family matters. Jessica, Emma is very smart. She had a right to know why my routine changed. Emma had a right for her grandmother to continue being her grandmother. Not some frustrated entrepreneur who uses her grandkids to validate her fantasies of greatness. Fantasies of greatness. As if earning an honest living was a ridiculous illusion for someone like me. Jessica, Emma will always be welcome in my house, but I will no longer allow you to use my grandchildren to manipulate me. Manipulate you? You think it's manipulation for a family to expect the grandmother to behave like one. I think it's manipulation when you tell me I don't love them when I don't do exactly what you expect. Jessica was silent for a moment, as if deciding how far she could push this conversation. All right, Helen, I see how it is. Thomas and I have been talking, and we've come to a conclusion. My stomach clenched. I knew that tone. It was the same one she had used when she told me there was no room for me at their Christmas Eve dinner. If you continue with this cookie obsession, if you keep putting your business before your family, you will not see the children again. The words landed like bombs in my living room. Pure blackmail. The cruelest threat they could make. Are you forbidding me from seeing my grandchildren? I'm giving you a choice. You're either a grandmother or you're a cookie seller. You can't be both. Why can't I be both? Because being a grandmother requires sacrifice, availability, putting the children's needs before your own. And clearly, you're no longer willing to do that. I rose slowly from my armchair. For the first time in 7 years, I looked Jessica directly in the eye without lowering my head, without feeling ashamed, without seeking her approval. Jessica, I was a single mother for 18 years. I worked 3 jobs to give Thomas an education. I got up at 4 in the morning to do other people's laundry before going to clean houses. I went without meals so he could have school supplies. I sacrificed everything. My youth, my health, my dreams, my chances to rebuild my life, all for him. My voice grew steadier with every word. And then I became a grandmother, and I sacrificed everything all over again. My time, my money, my comfort, my dignity. I took care of your children when they were sick. I took them to the park when you had more important things to do. I spent my pension on their gifts and their parties. Jessica tried to interrupt, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished. For 65 years, my life has been for others. For Robert, for Thomas, for you, for Emma and Paul. 65 years of being useful, of being helpful, of being invisible. I walked to my kitchen and took a tray of golden, perfect, fragrant cookies out of the oven. This, I said, holding up a cookie, this is the first thing I have done in my life that is completely mine. That comes from my hands, from my knowledge, from my effort. That gives me my own money, my own respect, my own pride. I walked back into the living room with the cookie in my hand. If you think I'm going to give up the only thing that has given me dignity in years just because you can't control me like you used to, you are very mistaken. Jessica looked at me as if she were seeing me for the first time, as if for 7 years she had been talking to a helpful ghost and now realized there was a real person, with her own will, standing in front of her. Very well, Helen. You've made your choice. From now on, I don't want you anywhere near my children. I hope your cookies give you the love you're going to lose from your family. The door slammed shut, and I was left standing in my living room, trembling not from fear, but from something I had never felt before. The feeling of having defended my right to exist as a whole person. For the first time in my life, I had chosen to respect myself above pleasing others. And although it hurt, I knew I had done the right thing. The first few weeks after the family break were the most difficult of my life, not because I missed the humiliations or the constant requests for money, but because the silence from my grandchildren was breaking my heart into pieces. Every time I saw children leaving the Latin school when I passed on the CTA bus, I imagined Emma and Paul wondering why their grandma had disappeared from their lives. But something strange began to happen. Without the constant interruptions, without having to be available 24 hours for family emergencies that were never really emergencies, my business grew in ways I could never have imagined. Sophie helped me open an Instagram account. Helen's Hometown Treats reached 1,000 followers in 2 weeks. The photos of my cookies went viral, especially when I told the stories behind each recipe. People weren't just buying cookies. They were buying nostalgia, buying love made into food, buying a connection to grandmothers they had lost or never known. "Mrs. Miller," Sophie told me one afternoon as we reviewed the orders at my kitchen table, "you need a bigger space. You can't work from your apartment anymore. You're getting orders from businesses, from events, even from restaurants that want to sell your products." She was right. My small kitchen had become an improvised factory. I had ingredients piled up in the living room, trays taking up my bed, and the oven running from 5 in the morning to 10 at night. "But where am I going to find a space, Sophie? I don't have money for commercial rent. My Uncle Carlos has a vacant industrial kitchen in the South Side neighborhood. It's small, but it has everything you need. Professional ovens, stainless steel tables, storage space. He told me he can rent it to you very cheaply in exchange for teaching him your cookie recipes." A professional kitchen. I, Helen Miller, widow, pensioner, 65 years old, was going to have a professional kitchen. The space was perfect. 500 square feet of pure potential, with white tiles that shone under the fluorescent tubes and equipment that looked like it was straight out of a cooking show. Carlos, a good-natured man in his 60s who had been a baker his whole life, welcomed me as if I were a lifelong colleague. "Mrs. Miller, I've tried your cookies, and I'm going to tell you one thing. You have blessed hands. This place has been empty for 6 months, waiting for the right person. The rent was $500 a month, exactly what I earned in 3 days of work from home. For the first time in my life, I was going to pay a commercial rent. I was officially going to be a businesswoman. The day I opened Helen's Hometown Treats, in its new location, more than 100 people showed up. Neighbors from the neighborhood, Instagram followers, customers who had been buying since I started. Mrs. Davis arrived with a bouquet of flowers. Carlos brought a bottle of sparkling cider to toast. Sophie had made promotional flyers with my story. "Mrs. Miller," said a young woman as she bought Anna's cookies, "you don't know how much you inspire me. I'm 40 years old and I thought it was too late to change careers. But if you could start at 65, maybe I can study to be a veterinarian like I always wanted." Those words touched me more than any congratulations. My story wasn't just changing my life, it was giving hope to other women who believed their dreams had an expiration date. 2 months after opening the shop, I received a call that changed everything again. "Mrs. Helen Miller, this is Sarah Thompson from Forbes magazine. We want to include you in our special on women who transform America after 60. Your story has reached us and we find it inspiring." Forbes, the most important business magazine in the country, wanted to write about me. "But I'm not an important businesswoman, miss. I just sell cookies." "Ma'am, in 6 months you went from having no income of your own to billing more than $10,000 a month. That makes you a successful businesswoman, regardless of your age or product." The interview was published in December, just before Christmas. Helen Miller, From Invisible Grandma to 65-Year-Old Entrepreneur, was the title. The cover photo showed me in my industrial kitchen, with my favorite apron, holding a tray of freshly baked cookies, smiling with a confidence that I myself didn't know I had. The article told my whole story: my daughter-in-law's contempt, the years of unrecognized sacrifice, the decision to value myself, the growth of the business, the family break. Sarah had written with a sensitivity that made my story sound brave instead of sad. The response was overwhelming. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Television programs wanted to interview me. Business schools invited me to give talks about entrepreneurship in old age. Other older women wrote to me telling me their own stories of family disdain. "Mrs. Miller," wrote a woman from Philadelphia, "I'm 70 years old and my family tells me I'm no good anymore because I don't know how to use a computer. Your story gave me the courage to sign up for an internet course." "Mrs. Miller," wrote another from Phoenix, "My children took away the store I had managed for 20 years because they said I was too old. After reading your article, I decided to open another. I had become, without looking for it, a symbol that dignity doesn't have an expiration date, that it's never too late to demand respect, that older women also have the right to dream." But the most beautiful thing came one afternoon in January, 6 months after Jessica had forbidden me from seeing my grandchildren. I was in the industrial kitchen preparing a special order of shortbread cookies when Carlos shouted from the entrance, "Mrs. Miller, you have a visitor." I came out, wiping my hands on my apron, and found Emma, my 12-year-old granddaughter, now taller, with her school uniform rumpled, and the face she makes when she has made an important decision. "Hi, Grandma." "Emma, honey, how did you get here?" "I looked up the address on Google. I took the subway by myself. Mom doesn't know I came." She came closer and hugged me with that intensity that only reunion hugs have. She smelled of teenage perfume and rebellion. "Grandma, I saw your picture in the magazine. Dad hid it, but I found it. You were in Forbes, really?" "Really, sweetie." "And is it true that you make a lot of money with the cookies?" "Yes, it's true." Emma looked at me with an admiration I hadn't seen in the eyes of any member of my family for months. "Grandma, I want to learn how to do business like you. We have to do a business project at school, and I want to do it about cookies. Will you help me?" We spent the whole afternoon baking together. Emma had the same skillful hands I remembered, but now she used them with a new determination. While kneading, she told me how things had been at home. "Mom and Dad say you abandoned us for the money. But I read the whole article, Grandma. I understood what really happened." "What did you understand, my love?" "That you never abandoned us. That they abandoned you first." Those words coming from the mouth of a 12-year-old girl made me cry for the first time in months. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of pride. My granddaughter had grown enough to understand the difference between love and abuse, between genuine affection and emotional manipulation. "Emma, I will always love you and Paul. You will always have a place in my heart and in my life. Can I come more often?" Without Mom knowing, "You can come whenever you want, my love. But I don't want you to have problems at your house. Grandma, I'm old enough now. I understand that adults sometimes make mistakes, even parents. And that grandmas also have the right to be happy." When Emma left that afternoon, taking with her a bag full of cookies to share with Paul in secret, I was left in my industrial kitchen, feeling complete for the first time in my adult life. I was a 65-year-old woman with a thriving business, a story that inspired others, a future full of possibilities, and, most importantly, a granddaughter who respected me not only as a grandma, but as a woman. I was no longer invisible. I was no longer just useful. I was Helen, businesswoman, inspiration, and finally, the owner of her own life. Today, as I write this story, it's been 2 years since Jessica called me the family's embarrassment, without knowing that her contempt would be the catalyst for the best time of my life. I'm sitting in the office of my second location, the one we opened in the South Side neighborhood last month, looking out the window at the movement of a Chicago that I now feel also belongs to me. Helen's Hometown Treats has become something I never imagined. We have 8 employees, all women over the age of 50 who, like me, needed a second chance to prove their worth. We bill over $320,000 a year, a figure that still seems unreal to me every time I see it in the reports that Sophie, now my partner and marketing director, prepares monthly. But the numbers, as impressive as they are, don't tell the whole story. The whole story is in the letters I receive daily, like the one from Elizabeth Carter, 68, from Houston. "Mrs. Miller, after reading your story, I decided to open my sewing workshop again. My son said I was too old to work, but in 6 months I have managed to support myself and even save for my medication." Or the one from Carol Rodriguez, 71, from San Diego. "Your cookies inspired me to start weaving again. Now I sell shawls online, and my grandchildren see me differently. I'm no longer the grandma who's in the way. I'm the grandma who's starting a business. My story became the story of thousands of American women who had accepted invisibility as the natural price of aging. Women who had believed that their only function was to be useful to others, that their dignity depended on their ability to serve, that their dreams had an expiration date. The Dignified After 60 Foundation we created with the help of pro bono lawyers has helped more than 500 women start their own businesses. We offer microloans without interest, training in social media, legal advice, and most importantly, a space where older women can discover that they still have a lot to offer the world. 3 months after Emma started visiting me in secret, Paul also came to my kitchen. My 10-year-old grandson, with that seriousness that children have when they have understood something important about adults. Grandma, is it true that Mom forbade you from seeing us because she didn't want you to work? What do you think, my love? I think it's wrong to forbid someone from working. My teacher says that working is a right. Paul now comes with me on Saturdays. Not to bake, because he doesn't like the kitchen, but to help me with social media. He has a natural ability for technology that I never had, and he has become my unofficial Instagram assistant. He's the one who uploads the photos of the new products, who responds to the messages from young customers, who teaches me the new apps that can help the business. Grandma, he told me last Saturday while editing a video of me preparing coconut macaroons, when I grow up, I want to have a business like yours. Of cookies? No, whatever. But I want it to be mine, like yours is yours. Those words filled me with a different kind of pride than I felt when my children got good grades or got jobs. It was the pride of knowing that my grandchildren saw me not only as the grandma who loves them, but as an example of what can be achieved with determination and self-respect. Thomas and Jessica continue to live in their bubble in Lincoln Park, pretending that I don't exist while they enjoy the economic comfort that comes from not having to help a dependent mother. Every now and then, Sophie tells me that she has seen Jessica's posts on Facebook boasting about her entrepreneurial mother-in-law's independence, as if my success was something she had fostered instead of fought. I'm not bothered by her hypocrisy. In fact, it amuses me, because I understand that her need to narratively appropriate my story is an involuntary confession. They know they were wrong, but their pride doesn't allow them to admit it directly. Last month, Emma turned 13. They didn't invite me to the party, but she came to my shop the next day with a mischievous smile and a confession that filled me with joy. Grandma, at my party, all my friends asked if it was true that my grandma was the lady of the famous cookies from Forbes. When I told them yes, they asked me for autographs for their moms. Really? Really? And when Mom found out, she got so proud that she started telling your story as if she had been your biggest supporter from the beginning. Emma and I laughed together, accomplices of a truth that only we fully knew. Her mother could rewrite history to look good with the other moms at the Latin school. But Emma had witnessed the reality. She had seen the contempt, the humiliation, the prohibition, and she had also seen my transformation, my strength, my refusal to remain invisible. Last week, I received an invitation I never expected. Loyola University asked me to give the keynote address at their seminar on age-defying entrepreneurship. Me, who never finished high school because I had to start working when my father died, was going to talk to university students about business and determination. Distinguished students, I said at the beginning of my presentation, looking at those young faces full of ambition and privilege that I never had. My name is Helen Miller. I'm 67 years old. And until I was 65, I thought my life was over. I told them my whole story, the contempt, the manipulation, the invisibility, but also the decision. The first dollar earned with my hands. The first time I defended myself, the growth of the business, the family break, the professional recognition. The lesson I want to share with you, I said at the end, isn't that it's never too late to start. That phrase is beautiful but empty. The real lesson is that it's never too late to demand the respect you deserve, to refuse to be invisible, to choose your own dignity over the comfort of others. The applause lasted 5 minutes. But what moved me the most was the line of students that formed afterwards to take pictures with me and tell me about their grandmothers. about older women in their families who had accepted invisibility as an inevitable fate. Professor Miller, a young woman in her 20s, told me, "Can I send your video to my grandmother? She's 72 and says she's no good anymore because my uncles make her feel like a burden." Of course, dear. And tell her that if she needs to talk to someone who understands what it feels like, I'm here. Because that's another important part of what I do now. Accompanying other women who are living what I lived, who feel invisibility as an inevitable destiny, who have accepted that their value is measured only by their usefulness to others. Every week I receive calls, messages, visits from women my age or older who want to know how to find the courage to change a life that seemed already written in stone. And I tell them the truth. It's not easy, it's not quick, and it doesn't always end with beautiful family reconciliations like in the movies. But it does end with something more valuable, with the feeling that you are the owner of your own existence, that your decisions belong to you, that your dignity is not in the hands of others. This morning, as I was preparing the dough for a new recipe of coffee cookies with cinnamon, I asked myself what I would say to the Helen from 2 years ago, that 65-year-old woman who was crying in her small apartment, feeling like a burden to her own family. I would tell her that the pain she feels is real, but it is not permanent, that the invisibility they have imposed on her is not her destiny, but a decision of others that she can change, that her hands are worth more than she imagines, that her knowledge is a treasure, that her experience is wisdom. I would tell her that it's not too late to be happy on her own terms, because at 67, I have learned that the true revolution is not always noisy. Sometimes it's silent, made up of small daily decisions, saying no when you've always said yes, charging for your work when you've always given it away for free, demanding respect when you've always accepted crumbs of affection. My revolution began with a recipe for anise cookies, and the decision that my dignity was worth more than the comfort of others. And you? Have you experienced anything similar, or do you know someone who is going through this invisibility imposed by the family? Tell me in the comments. Your story matters as much as mine, and if this story touched your heart, please share it. Maybe there's a Helen in your family, in your neighborhood, in your life, who needs to know that it's not too late to shine with her own light. Like and subscribe so that this message reaches those who need to hear it most.